The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The temptation in the wilderness. Jesus was led by the Spirit out into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, after which he was very hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to turn into loaves." But he replied, "Scripture says, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." The devil then took him to the holy city and made him stand on the parapet of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, throw yourself down, for Scripture says, He will put you in His angels' charge, and they will support you on their hands, in case you hurt your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, "Scripture also says, you must not put the Lord your God to the test." Next, taking him to a very high mountain, the devil showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "I will give you all these," he said, "if you fall at my feet and worship me." Then Jesus replied, "Be off, Satan, for Scripture says, you must worship the Lord your God and serve Him alone." Then the devil left him, and angels appeared and looked after him. The Gospel of the Lord. Last Wednesday at the parish office in Singleton, some members of our parish gathered for the first Lenten scriptural program. "With an everlasting love" was our theme. The conversation focused on the two creation accounts in Genesis. We were comparing the two creation stories, and we were able to make general sketches of the differences between the two narratives. A significant difference the texts presented were the author's image of God. For one, we have noticed that in the first creation account, God is transcendent and all-powerful. Remember that story? When everything was chaotic, God said, "Let there be light," and suddenly there was light. And then the following story will say, "Let there be birds, seas, creatures, mountains." And it seems everything will just follow after God said those words. God was both transcendent and all-powerful. But in the second narrative, God is more personal and intimate. In the second creation story, the very reading that we've heard during the first reading, part of it we heard in today's first reading, there is emphasis on God's proximity. Remember, God went to the garden, pulled up His sleeves, and molded and shaped the earth, and breathed on it. Have someone breathed on you? You know how close you should be for you to feel the breathe of that other person. In the second creation account, God is personal and intimate. Is there a problem between a God who is both transcendent and all-powerful and personal and intimate? No, because even in our catechism, our doctrine tells us God is both transcendent and intimate. God is both all-powerful and loving. But the problem is not with God. The problem is with our response to the love this transcendent, intimate, personal, loving God had given us. And we saw that in the first reading. What was their response? Disobedience. The problem has something to do with humanity's response to God's openness for loving mercy. for loving intimacy. God gave everything to humanity. God had only one request: for them not to eat the fruit of the tree in the middle of the earth. But they did, and they decided to eat it. Some of you might advocate for Adam and Eve and say that they were just tempted to doing it. Tempted or not, they decided to eat it, and they ate it. After eating it, they did not only realize that they were naked, they felt shame. Do you remember your first act of disobedience to your parents? No? No? Who among you, if ever he or she will be disobedient to his or her parent, will run to his or her parent and say, "I disobeyed you"? No. We hide in shame because we know we offended someone who loves us. St. Paul, in today's second reading, reminded us that because of their decision to eat the fruit, death reigned over everyone. By throwing themselves in the arms of death, they consequently alienated themselves from the arms of the God of life. To be sinless then is to have the right relationship with God. Are all the decisions and actions in your life that you made in your life brought you closer to God? Are your relationships opportunities for you to be closer and intimate with God? What actions and decisions in your life made you feel shameful when you bring it at the foot of our God? Are there areas, relationships in your life that you feel shameful about if God sees that part of you? And if you feel shame, just remember the prayer of David in today's psalm. Be merciful to me. Be merciful to me. By the sin of Adam, all of humanity became sinners and were alienated from God. But by the righteousness of Jesus, Christ, of all of humanity became righteous and are restored to right relationship with God. Today's gospel reminds us on how to make that right relationship with God. That is by choosing God above all else and by placing our hope, our trust in God and in God alone. When Satan confronted Jesus in the wilderness, Jesus clearly manifested the kind of quality relationship Jesus had with God the Father. Unlike Adam and Eve, Jesus knew his commitment to God, that is, to put his trust and his hope in God, because this transcendent, all-powerful, loving, intimate God will never abandon him. Jesus hoped and trusted in God and in God alone. We all need food for sustenance. To work for it is not the problem. To think that by your own strength, you alone can sustain your life, that is where the problem lies. Work, but remember that everything comes from God. So be grateful for what you have and trust that God will satisfy what you need. We do not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. And we all need power to secure us in our work, in our businesses, and in our relationships. To possess power, be it at work or in your family, is not the problem. To think that you can abuse people and demand people to do your bidding because of the power you have over them can become intoxicating and can corrupt you to your core. Power is entrusted to you, to us, because the summit and fountain of our power is God alone, and we will be accountable to God for that. You must not worship yourself if you have power. You must worship the Lord your God alone and serve God alone. Let us not fall into the sin of trusting in our powers, in our superannuation, and in Centerlink. I mean, cash in on your super and get your pension from Centerlink, but remember, God will never abandon us. God only asks that we put our trust and our hope in our God.